There are 3 things every woman needs to know about PCOS that I can almost guarantee your doctor didn't tell you. Now, if you don't know me, my name's Sarah, and I've had PCOS for just about a decade. And after trying and failing to reverse my symptoms for over 11 years, I was finally able to lose 30 pounds and heal my body naturally. So in this video, what we're gonna cover is number 1, what is PCOS and why it's so hard to get diagnosed. Number 2, why the medical system is failing to help women with PCOS. And number 3, most importantly, what is making you sick and the key hormonal imbalances that are driving the majority of your symptoms. This is literally everything that I wish my doctor had told me at the beginning of my PCOS journey to give me a clear path to feeling better. So diving right into number 1, PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's a chronic hormonal disorder. And the first challenge that women with PCOS have to overcome is simply getting diagnosed. Believe it or not, but it takes on average 2 years and 3 or more doctor's visits to actually get diagnosed in the first place. So if you're struggling right now with irregular periods, with weight gain and infertility, with excess facial hair growth, or going bald and aren't sure if it's PCOS because you haven't received an official diagnosis, well, chances are it's PCOS. And this is my first point. Part of the problem that women with PCOS face is just figuring out and confirming they have PCOS to begin with. In my case, I first started showing symptoms when I was a teenager, and it took me 8 years to actually get diagnosed. Yes, 8 long years dealing with symptoms, having no idea what is wrong with me. And just to play devil's advocate, the reason why doctors struggle to diagnose PCOS in the first place is because it can present differently from woman to woman. And this is because PCOS is a syndrome. That means it's a collection of symptoms. So anytime you think of syndrome, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or other syndromes, that's just what a syndrome is. It's a collection of symptoms. And ultimately, PCOS is a result of your hormones being chronically imbalanced, so messed up for a long period of time. And your hormones are the chemical messengers that control every function in your body, your mood, your energy, your fertility, all of these things. So you can imagine if they're messed up for a long time, just how damaging that can be, which makes a delayed diagnosis from doctors even more damaging. So how do you know if you have PCOS? Well, the most tried and true way to find out if you have PCOS is through the Rotterdam criteria. According to the Rotterdam criteria, you have PCOS by definition if you show 2 of the following 3 symptoms. Number 1, showing signs of excess male hormones. This can be confirmed through blood test or simply expressing too many androgens. So what that looks like in women is hair loss, male pattern balding, or growing hair where a man normally would, like on your chin or your chest, nipples, or even on your happy trail. Okay, and these are not like peach fuzz, which I also have, but these are thick, coarse hairs. Number 2 is irregular periods. This is periods that are too close together or too far apart. And if you're like me, it might be missing altogether. Number 3 is cysts on your ovaries. Now, this would be confirmed on an ultrasound, and it's also referred to the string of pearls. Now, when I say cysts on your ovaries, I don't mean cysts in the traditional sense. These are essentially follicles that hold eggs on your ovaries to be released. What happens when you have PCOS is your follicle doesn't mature to release the egg. Instead, it fills up with fluid, and that's what creates the cysts. So just to reiterate, to have PCOS, you would have any 2 of those 3. And ultimately, these are just a handful of the symptoms you may experience when you have PCOS. And it's important to note that the symptoms you experience will present differently from woman to woman. And that's part of the reason why it's incredibly hard to get a diagnosis in the first place, and even harder to treat at the end of the day. This brings me to number 2, which is if you're like me and 99% of women with PCOS, guess what? Doctors won't help you. I know that's a bold statement, but the reality is when you get diagnosed with PCOS, they will give you one of 2 options. Number 1, to go on birth control, a medication you will take indefinitely until you want to have children. Now, if we just think about this for a second, why on earth would you go on a medication that prevents you from having children when one of the symptoms of PCOS is infertility? Which means both on and off birth control, you will not be able to have children. So what exactly are we solving with this? And if I could go back and save my younger self from a bloody nightmare, I wouldn't have gone on birth control, because that was the first thing that I tried to manage my PCOS symptoms. And you want to know what happened? I instantly traded bad for worse. Normally on birth control, what's supposed to happen is you take the medication for 3 weeks. Then on the final week, you take a placebo with no medication. It's simply a sugar pill. And that is when you're supposed to have your artificial period. And I had the complete opposite reaction. I bled for 3 of 4 weeks. And I finally got to the placebo, the only time you're supposed to bleed, and it all just stopped. And what was more concerning is I went to my doctor about this, and they just told me to keep taking it to work out the kinks. Spoiler alert, the kinks didn't work themselves out. And option number 2, I can't believe I'm saying that, but they will send you on your merry way and do nothing for you. If you're lucky, they'll cross their fingers and hope you get better, which is unlikely. When I stopped going to the doctor and left my PCOS untreated, I just got worse. I put on 50 pounds, grew a beard thicker than my boyfriend's, and was so scared I was going bald because my hair was just falling out in clumps. On top of it all, I was so exhausted that I barely had the energy to get out of bed in the morning. And this was all because I did the worst possible thing for my PCOS, which was nothing at all. If you don't change a thing, hormonal imbalances don't work themselves out. They just get worse and worse. And doctors won't warn you. They're not gonna tell you the truth about what happens when you leave your PCOS untreated, because why would they? They're not incentivized to do so. Why? Because PCOS untreated just presents more and more symptoms that they can treat, aka prescribe you medication to fix and make more money off of. No period? Take birth control. Can't lose weight? Ozempic. Congested? How about a nasal spray? Feeling down? Well, just pop these antidepressants. That should do the trick. The more individual symptoms you have to treat, the more prescriptions they get to write you. The more medication they get to sell, the more money they get to make. They're really not incentivized to help you reverse your symptoms to heal your PCOS, because a healed person doesn't make them money. They're not incentivized to help you actually balance your hormones or prevent you from even developing PCOS in the first place, because a clean bill of health doesn't make anybody money. Instead, what they're gonna do is kick the can down the road to worsening health, prescribing you all of these things that might not even be helping. They might actually be hurting you in the long run, leading to worsening health, more doctor's appointments, more specialists, and when you're ready to try and conceive, fertility specialists. All while ignoring the root cause of your chronic condition, which is why the illness is exploding in women of reproductive age. 1 in 10 women have PCOS. It's even estimated that 1 in 8 now have PCOS, which is ridiculous. And this is all because the medical system, it's failing to help women heal their hormonal imbalances, which is why I've had to take matters into my own hands. And ever since, I have been on a journey to heal my body and reverse my symptoms naturally without traditional medicine, because it hasn't helped me and it hasn't helped so many women. As well-intentioned as a lot of doctors are, I can almost guarantee they didn't tell you nearly as much about PCOS or about what's causing it. This brings me to point number 3, which is what is making you sick and the key hormonal imbalances driving the majority of your symptoms. Did you know that if you have PCOS, there is a 40% chance that you will develop full-blown diabetes by the time you turn 40? 40%. Diabetes is simply severe insulin resistance. Insulin is the hormone responsible for clearing sugar from your bloodstream. Over time, what happens is you become more and more insulin resistant. So your cells stop responding to the hormone, and to compensate, your body releases more and more insulin. Now, that insulin isn't just benign. It will signal other things when it's chronically high. High insulin is actually responsible for imbalancing your male-female hormones. It causes an increase in those male hormones called androgens, which is why you start growing a beard. It's why you start losing your hair. When insulin is high, it does two things. It increases the production of androgens in your ovaries, and it also prevents those androgens from being converted into estrogen. If you have insulin resistance, you will also have a hard time losing weight. And this is because insulin will trigger fat storage, especially around your midsection. It's why you may work out extremely hard. It's why you may eat at a calorie deficit with PCOS and still see zero results. Insulin resistance is responsible for 80% of your symptoms. And if you fix that, you will feel so much better. But it is not the only hormone imbalance to worry about. Under chronic stress, your PCOS will get worse. Cortisol is known as your fight or flight hormone. So if you're being chased by a tiger in immediate danger, cortisol spikes to give you an energy boost to get to safety. This creates spikes of cortisol throughout the day under different stressors. But what a lot of people don't know is that cortisol is on a rhythm. It's on a 24-hour cycle that is supposed to be highest to wake you up, to get you out of bed in the morning, and then taper off to allow you to go to sleep. What happens when you're chronically stressed is that cortisol fails to come down at night. This leads to so many problems for women with PCOS. It's why you may go throughout the entire day feeling so exhausted that your eye sockets hurt behind your head, and finally go to bed, lay your head down, and then feel wired and tired the whole night. And unfortunately, when cortisol is imbalanced and it starts to disrupt your sleep, cause insomnia, that lack of sleep disrupts your hormones even more. On top of that, when cortisol is chronically high, you'll also start to sacrifice non-essential functions like digestion. So if you experience bloating, constipation, no sex drive, these are some of the functions that when you're in immediate danger, when cortisol's high, will be sacrificed until cortisol can be brought back down and signaled that our body's safe. And part of the problem that women with PCOS face is how we're living in modern society. We are under chronic stress 24/7 that is driving our hormonal imbalances and making us feel worse. Chronically high cortisol messes with your reproductive system, with your metabolism, and triggers inflammation, which is another driver of PCOS. Inflammation is part of your body's immune response, and it's basically responsible for helping signal your body to heal itself. In the short term, inflammation is great. It's how your body heals from damage. If you experience swelling, that's inflammation. If you struggle with acne, that's inflammation. If you feel stiff and achy, that's inflammation. If you wake up in the morning with a swollen, puffy face, that's moon face, that is inflammation. Moon face is also a sign of high cortisol. What a coincidence. And this is why PCOS is a damn nightmare, because every single issue just feeds into the next one, spiraling your health out of control. You're insulin resistant, you're chronically stressed with high cortisol, and you're chronically inflamed. And all of the pressure from these three things keeps your hormones chronically imbalanced. So if you want to reverse your symptoms and feel better, you have to get to the root cause and start there. It means fixing your insulin resistance, rebalancing your cortisol, and lowering inflammation, because these are all driving your hormone imbalances. Now that you understand everything I wish my doctor would have told me at the beginning of my journey, I did put together a quick video on my story, which you can check out here.